Thank you. And thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. It's been a pleasure and an honor to meet many of you. I look forward to meeting all of you. Again, I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack and talk about trade associations and use the International Egg Commission as an example of such a trade association. And by definition, a trade association is multiple stakeholders coming together around a particular interest. And because of that, you have diversity in the types of organizations and associations that are participating in these trade groups, which I think is a strength, and I think aligns quite well with some of the topics that we've been discussing here these past 2 days, because the goals and objectives are very different than they are with a for-profit company. In the case of the International Egg Commission, this is the trade association for eggs globally, and it represents many different types of organizations across the value chain. So you have the ingredient companies that provide feed or ingredients for the feed. You have the companies that produce the equipment for barns or cage systems that house the animals. You have the producers themselves, which in some cases are corporations or companies, but often these are multi-generation businesses that have been passed down, that are families that continue that business in their community. You have companies that are involved in the processing of eggs, both in terms of the grading, the sizing, in some cases the washing, the packaging. You have companies that are involved in just the packaging aspect, companies involved in the processing in terms of spray-dried eggs or liquid eggs, as well as companies that are involved in processing related to hard boiling of the eggs. So you have multiple different groups all coming together around a common interest and trying to solve issues that are much longer term than shorter term profit. One of the aspects with the egg community in particular are some of these bigger issues that they've been tackling that relate to poultry diseases such as avian influenza, as well as some of the complications that come from migrating the production systems to a cage-free system, which has numerous issues associated with it, and the global community's been working towards that. But a lot of what this community does coming together is around the promotion of eggs. And again, this is consistent with all other trade groups. There's usually a promotional aspect, and the nutrition piece has really been what the industry has been rallying around, and for good reason, because eggs have a lot of nutrients in there, and in fact, there's varying levels of all essential nutrients for humans with the exception of vitamin C. And that's because the hens themselves can produce vitamin C, and therefore it's not necessary to be deposited within the egg. I think for many years, the industry has rallied around the nutrition content of eggs, but there was the concerns around heart disease that inhibited the positive messaging that comes from the nutrition package. But that's changed finally in recent years. And for the first time, just in the last year, there's been some evidence to show that eggs in some of these malnourished populations that we've been discussing can have a very significant impact on growth and development. So one of the key studies that came out last year was in Ecuador that provided 1 egg a day to infants that were 6 to 9 months during the complementary feeding period. And the results were about a 74% reduction in the prevalence of underweight, and then a 47% reduction in stunting. There's been similar studies in Uganda. And if you were to talk to an egg farmer even 10, 20, 30 years ago, they would have told you that this is what they would have expected because they've been seeing these types of stories themselves in some of the charitable work that they've done for the past several decades. Again, the promotional aspect of the egg industry is around bringing eggs to parts of the world that may not have access to eggs currently. And so what the egg industry has done in the last several decades is really look at where eggs are not, and a lot of that is in Africa, the continent of Africa, and some other parts of Asia. And so again, with the nutrition front of mind, a lot of the efforts of the industry have been to target these areas and the malnourished communities to bring eggs to those individuals. And I'm just going to highlight very briefly some of the efforts that the industry has done in this regard. It really started with an orphanage in Swaziland And this was through the charitable arm of the International Egg Commission, which is the International Egg Foundation, and the passion of just a small number of individuals within the industry that was able to bring together several of the stakeholders within the trade organization itself to build a small production facility associated with an orphanage in Swaziland. And once that was established, and once that production system was creating a number of eggs, then they took that to the community. And again, the strength of some of these trade associations is that there's a number of different partners involved with a number of different areas of expertise, and so a lot of the industry came together to develop the technology to be able to manage eggs in this remote part of Swaziland, to be able to hard boil the eggs and use a technology that enabled these eggs to be shelf stable for 30 days at 30 degrees Celsius so that they could put them on a truck and take them out into the community in schools and churches to bring these eggs to these kids that otherwise do not have access to high quality protein or many of the nutrients that are within the egg itself. Other efforts have involved providing hens to pre-adolescents in Uganda, and the insight there was that providing the hens to the children protected the hens and allowed them to be used as a small business where these children were selling the eggs, making money for their family. The adults, when given the hens, unfortunately were using the hens itself as food and not as using them as a sustainable source of food with the laying capacity. And then in Mozambique, this is a recent effort where they are building training centers and actually going in and doing a 2-year program to train people in that region on how to create these production systems, small scale, and then they're giving grants and have a profit sharing scheme to be able to support these individuals to create these businesses. And my last point, and this has to do with the industry too in general, as someone that has worked in the private sector for 20 years now, we talk about them as an entity. We talk about these companies as a single entity, but they are people. There are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of individuals that work for these companies that have a passion and an expertise in this area, in malnutrition, in nutrition, in food science, in food technology, in food safety. And it's those individuals and engaging with those individuals that I think will lead to the success of a partnership with the private sector. Thank you.